Shalom friends, welcome back to learning the Hebrew Alef-Bet. In this video we're going to be in tutorial number 7 I believe, and I'm going to look at 3 new Hebrew letters. So let me get my pen squared away, and you'll notice one of them looks similar to one of the vowel marks we just learned, the Vav, and we'll talk about that in a second, how to pronounce that by itself. So, tutorial number 7. The reason we learn these 3 characters together is because they look similar in appearance. It makes them easier to remember. Basically, think of us having a line on a page that you would write on. So this first one, which is called the Yud, really looks more like an apostrophe to us in English, maybe a little bit bigger. It doesn't go down, touch the page, the line on the page. The next one is the Vav, and you heard me referring to that as over here. Actually, I didn't put in the last vowel marks we learned was this one had the U pronunciation, and then the other one with the dot at the top had the just regular O, like OH. And I was calling this a Cholam Vav. And that's where this comes from. This line by itself is a letter as well, Vav. And then the last one here is the final Nun. And you may wonder, why are we going to learn a final form of a letter before we learn the initial or medial form? And the reason being is it just makes it easier to remember them if you learn the 3 of them at the same time. It also makes it a little bit more complicated because you got to get used to seeing them. Sometimes it can get hard to discern between the 3 of them, and, as well with the conjunction with the other vowel marks. So the Yud will have the pronunciation, the equivalent of the English Y. It also will act as a vowel marker as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but for right now, just think of it as by itself as getting the Y sound. The Vav in this way, it's another one that gets the V sound. When you see it by itself without a dot around it, you're going to typically use a V. In ancient Hebrew, it also sometimes got the W pronunciation as well. So if you're familiar with the Yud He Vav He, the holy name for God, yeah, that a lot of times is translated as Yahweh. That's where they get that from. It's using that Vav or Wa. And sometimes you'll see it written that way, like W-A-W, and still pronounced as Vav. But for now, we'll just think of it as having a V pronunciation. And the final Nun, it will have the equivalent of the English N. But we're only going to use this version at the end of a word. I'm not even going to worry about using the block script because you can see there's not much to them. They just kind of, one looks like an apostrophe, the other one more like an upside down hockey, I think like a hockey stick. But in the block script, a lot of times and sometimes in the handwriting script, and sometimes in some of the ancient text, they'll really just look like straight lines. So typically that's how you're going to see them in the handwriting script. So for the Vav, it's just like let's see, if we have an imaginary kind of page line coming over here, the Vav is just going to come down like such. The Nun, the final Nun, will come down beneath the line, so it's going to be a little bit longer. The Yud, you'll either see it kind of maybe like that. I'll show you a different way as well. The final Nun again, and then the Vav. Sometimes you'll see the Nun, the Yud like that as well. And you can practice that with the block script if you want. I will say that I'll come back and save exercise 3 to give you some suggestions of how to practice to get used to those, because when you see all 3 of them in a word, it get kind of confusing. So let's go ahead and practice them with our vowel marks. If we used vo, first we'd have just the vav by itself, and then we'd have the vav with the dot at the top to get the, the vo pronunciation. Va would be the vav with the patah about down below, and then va again with the v'kamats. Later on, we'll talk about the difference between these two vowel marks. But yo would be just the yud, and then next to it you'd have the chol and vav. Then the vod, I'm sorry, vu would be the vav and then the u vowel mark. So you start seeing how they can get confusing when they start showing up together. Ya would be the just the yud with patah down below, and then I might sometimes write it that way as well. Ya with the yud with the chamats down below, and the vowel mark will always appear beneath, as if the character was, you know, touched down, went all the way to the bottom of the line. Exercise 5 is just to give you an idea of using English words. Again, just try to spell English words using Hebrew characters. So if we wanted to write something like the name Sean, we could use the shin with the shin dot to the top right. You could use a kamatz or the patah, and then the final nun would be like Sean. Sain, we would use the sin dot top left, and the hard A, the tseri vowel mark, and then the final nun. For lane, we do the lamed, hard A vowel mark, final nun, and kind of get the idea at this point. So for dun, we would have the dalet, the u vowel mark, and then the final nun. Moon will be the same. We're just going to use the mem there, and we'll use the same vowel mark. So remember the mem, u, and then the final nun. And then Sharon or Sharon, I'm thinking more like the name Sharon. We use a sheen. We use patah there. Resh, and then an O vowel mark, and then the final nun. Now I did something here we haven't. Actually, I didn't. I stay consistent. I'll explain this a little bit later. Okay, so some easy Hebrew words. Let's see. Well, this is just a name like Dave. You know, Dave comes from David, right? But we could write that using the dalet, the vav, and then the tseri, the hard A vowel mark. But the actual name David, I believe is well, you can see it written this way, which is the dalet, the vav, the yud, and then the dalet again, like David. I think also another way was Daoud. So you might actually see it more like this, just the dalet, the vav, and the dalet. If it's going to be like David, it'll have a different vowel mark down below. If it's going to be pronounced as Daoud, which was another way of pronouncing that, it may just appear like that, etc. We can also, for vav, we could just use a vav. If we want to write this, a vav of kamatz, and end that with a vav. That would be the letter vav. And then bait is going to be a bet, dagesh in the middle. We're going to put a hard A vowel mark down below. The yud, and then the tav. And this in Hebrew means house. Bain is similar. Bet, tseri, and then yud, and in this case you see where that Y is kind of almost acting like a vowel itself. And then this bain means son. So if you've heard like bain Elohim or Benai Elohim is the plural version of it, would be like son of God or sons of God. Yesh will be a yud, tseri, and then a sheen. And this is a very common word in Hebrew that typically means like possession, like to have, or there is. You'll see this used a lot, and it'll be explained later on. But yesh is a very common word. Yom would be a yud, chol vav, and then the final mem. And this means day in Hebrew, and like Yom Echad would be like day one, and so on and so forth. You hear that a lot in the Bible. And one final simple word in Hebrew is yam, and this would be sea. So it would be a yud, chamatz, and then a final mem. So yam, it means sea. And these are very similar words, yom and yam. Remember, if you ever heard Yom Kippur, day, Yom Kippur, referring to a day. Um, Very common words you'll see in Hebrew. One thing to leave you with to think about is to practice. In Hebrew, there is no J. There was no J. So there's some workarounds to get the J pronunciation in modern Hebrew, but in ancient Hebrew, there was no J. Sometimes words beginning like, I don't know if I remember how it was exactly spelled. I think this was one of the ways to spell Yeshua, or Yehoshua was really more like Joshua. That's how we would say it in English. So a lot of times this Y, you would use the Y, and we'll think of Jerusalem, and then we say Jerusalem in English. So a lot of times the Yud in certain words will in English get translated to a J. That's what I was. If you think of some words to practice like June, here you're gonna get. You could use like a, to say Yun. That you could use a Yud. The colon. I'm sorry, the U vowel mark, and then the final Nun. And you want to practice words that have all three of these in them, and it'll test your ability, your comprehension to to remember them. So that is the Yud, the Vav, and the final Nun, and we will pick up in the next lesson. And we'll see you then.